Well, hi, Andre. How are you?
Hello, Michael. Doing well, thanks.
We had a little bit of a technical glitch getting getting up here and running on Zoom because they change the software. They update the software. It's like ruined every half an hour, and they don't tell you they're doing that. And then when I logged in to try to talk to you, I had no picture, and then I had to get my password. But here we are. So we're getting
Yes,
ready. We're getting ready for AXPONA, and
yes.
so let's talk about how do you strategize Axpona? How do you plan this? Just curious.
Okay. Well, there's two approaches. Generally, if I'm covering the show, which is the majority of the time, um, we'll meet prior to the show, maybe a day or two before. The editor, Robert Harley, will send out assignments for each of us, and task generally assigns component areas for someone to cover. So, for instance, if I had analog, for instance, or speakers, sometimes those will be split up between some price point of 30,000 and below and 30,000 and above, and an individual will get assigned to each of them. So that's typically how the coverage happens with the show coverage, just in general. And people can look on the website, and they'll see our show coverages are typically done that way. There are some shows where there's a smaller group, and the guys who are there will discuss it amongst themselves, and they may split it up. I know Andrew um, and Alan at the Florida show decided how they were going to cover the show, which was a little different than the larger shows when we get assignments. So once the assignments are done, one of the things I typically will do is try and find out either ahead of time, or sometimes it's in real time because the information isn't delivered to the writers and the reviewers, what new products are available at the show. And most of the time, people are really interested in new products, and so we try and find the new products that are being debuted and that are interesting to discuss at the show. The hard part with all of that is typically getting the information, and the fact that I think we're in the neighborhood of 170-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood, rooms this year at Expona.
Uh, Now you've frozen. Oh, we're having a wonderful day. We're having a wonderful day today.
May I understand
There you
that
are.
now?
Yeah, now
Um,
you're back. Now
I'm
you're back.
fine on my end.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. How you doing? All right, good. So there's about
You were saying
170
you have
rooms.
160 rooms or so to cover.
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood is the room, the number of rooms. So depending on what your assignment is, you can somehow parse that out, and it becomes less. For instance, but if you're covering all source components, for instance, that's all rooms, and then you need to find out which room has new components in it, and so that becomes a little bit challenging over the course of the 3 days of the show. But we managed to find out the new where the new components are, and try and get to them. We don't always, get it 100% right, because it's hard to get all the information that's necessary to cover the show. But that's kind of the approach as far as the reporting goes, and to find the information. Now, usually what I'll do is I'll try and work an area, for instance, the tower area where you're on the floors. I may start at the top of the floors, look at the guide that's there, kind of outline the rooms I know have new equipment in them, and then try and get through those. And then areas that I'm not certain about, and I have to go into all the rooms to find out if something new is in there, I'll do that, and then I'll cover that. Along with that, we also have to listen, to systems that are mature, or ones that have been around for a while, and because we, want to know how they sound, and how the setup is, and report on some of that as well, not just specifically new components. And so it becomes a bit of a challenge. So I
And
work
then
through there, and then I
sometimes
work.
a room will not list a piece of equipment that's brand new. It's a room that you're familiar with, some of the old stuff that's in it, but then they bring something new into the room and they don't tell you about it. till the show's over. Then
Yes.
there was what in what room? I didn't. That happens too.
Yes, that happens a lot also. But you know, Expona's gotten a little bit better about it. The guys that are running the show know that, you know, we'd like to know about new components ahead of time so that we can identify where they are and cover them. But, you know, things slip through the cracks at times, and the information sometimes doesn't get out, or you don't know about it. And so, yeah, we do forget, or we don't get a chance to experience those
Do
components.
you get people saying to you, Andre, have you got a half an hour to talk to me about something? You say, a half an hour? No, I don't have a half an hour to talk about anything with anybody. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, that does happen a lot, and it's difficult because, you know, there's only so much time we have. We need to be cordial and, you know, discuss some things, but try and keep it succinct, you know, and to the point. And if we have time after the show hours or something like that to discuss something, that's fine. But during the show, it's kind of hard to do that unless
Yeah.
you're, you know, you've laid out everything and you have time to actually get to meet someone and do that.
And so
when
when
you
you
schedule time for it.
when you get the show guide, I mean that when you get to the show and you get the show guide, often that's when you first see what's really there in detail, and then you got to
Yes,
sit there the night before and plot it all out.
that's
So
true. You
it can be
do,
difficult.
and but they've gotten a little bit better. I think this year some of the rooms and the information can be downloaded
Yeah.
in a PDF file, so we'll have a chance to look at some of that information ahead of time. But I think that for at least for writers that are looking, the best thing to be able to do is for the manufacturers and the show sponsors to get together and make sure that they communicate what components are actually newly introduced components.
Yep.
And have a list of those so that we can at least look at them and figure out, you know, where they are and make sure that we've got them on our list to hit those spots to be able to look at and see and report on that information.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
that,
sometimes we get that situation where they'll say it's a new component, but it was at last year's AXPONA, or it
yeah.
was at, you know, a show that was, you know, 6 months ago or something like that. And so a little bit of discernment is necessary when dealing with that. But I'd rather have too much information than not enough in
Yes.
this particular case.
Yes. And it's up to them to get in touch with us about certain products that they know we're going to be covering. I mean, I'm going to
Yes.
be covering analog, so I was very happy to get certain emails already from this show about new products that are going to be at the show. But other times I go to shows and there was something really interesting and worthwhile to see that I just had to pass the room because, oh, I know all of what's in that room and I must keep moving. And then I find out later that in that room was some really good product to cover. Yeah, so we're kind of in the same ballpark as far as that goes. But I always cover the show just for my website, my previous website. And so I was just looking for analog things. And at this show, I'll probably mostly be doing that as well, but also looking for other interesting things because we cover other interesting things. And I'll cover what I can cover for tasks as editor at large. I'll be largely roaming around and, you know, seeing what I can see. So what do you think about reading show reports where people review equipment in the showrooms, you know, in these hotel rooms, and go into specific details about timbral balance and all these other issues that we tend to really need to be covering when we get the equipment home, and they do it at shows? I just think that's wrong. I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, if they're trying to pass that off as a full up review, it's a little bit skeptical, you know, from that perspective. Typically, if you have a system that's kind of hitting on nearly all cylinders and it sounds good, yeah, you can talk about some of the things you noticed, but it's a spot assessment of what you hear in that moment. I kind of don't classify that as a review, so to speak, you know, something similar to what we do when we have a component, you know, somewhere around 3 months or so to get to know it, to evaluate it, to find out what it's doing, and get a handle on it, you know, within an environment that you're familiar with equipment you're familiar with, in a room that you're familiar with.
Yeah.
You know, what is it? the rooms and this equipment idiosyncrasies are that you have. And so, yeah, there's a big difference between those two. And hopefully people understand that. And if the person is talking that way, then hopefully they convey that information as opposed to saying, this is a review, read my review on this. And well, what kind of review is it? Is
Yeah,
it
I always
one that,
I say when I walk into a room, if it sounds really bad, I won't say anything because these rooms can be very difficult. If the person
yeah,
running the room says, I'm getting great sound at this show, then it's fair game to say whatever you want as far as I'm concerned. But most of the people involved in this business are veterans. They've been in these rooms. They know what's going on. And when you walk in the room as a reviewer, they'll go, hey, I'm getting this 80 hertz bump. I'm getting these, this bad thing going, but try to listen around it. And that's fair enough as far as I'm concerned. But judging
yeah,
the sound of equipment in a hotel room is not really useful as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, it's difficult to be able to do that. And but again, if everything sounds, fairly fundamentally okay, then yeah, you can mention that. It's how it sounds or whatnot. But no, that's not a review for certain.
Yeah,
Not from our perspective anyway.
I was at the show in Montreal and I was surprised by how many rooms did not have signage for the things that were in the room. No signage, like a whole bunch of speakers in a room. You don't know what they are. They don't tell you what they are. And not especially a one sheet. I think a one sheet is such an important thing. You walk in a room and the person running the room could say, here's a one sheet with everything in this room. It's not
Yes.
only useful for us as reviewers, but even for consumers coming in to have a one sheet when they go home and go, oh, I know that room. Yeah, here's what was in the room. And they don't
Yeah.
do that often enough.
Yeah. That's very useful. I always ask for that when I'm in a room because it's really helpful, especially for us for doing show reports and identifying all the equipment that's in the room, its pricing and whatnot, which people are interested in knowing, if you're reporting on the show. But like you said, if you're just a person coming in to observe this equipment and see what's going on, you have an interest. And if you're asking for a sheet, with the information with what components are in the room, you're interested in. And so it'd be a good idea to have that available for them as well.
It is, and not enough do it, and they all should do it. The other thing sometimes these room people forget is that this is a show. It is a show, and a show by definition means you put on a show, and you should be able to talk about the equipment with people who walk in, and you should engage the people who walk in. You should not be hiding behind your phone while they walk in. I mean, I got invited to a room in Montreal in an email from a publicist. Please go visit this room and check out these speakers. So I walk in the room and I'm with my camera and I'm taking video and I'm shooting it. And the guy who's running the room was just sitting there on his phone. And I walk right up to him, put the thing in his face. Like, I'm not going to say, hey, talk to me. I want him to engage me. I don't expect to have to engage him. And I walk around the equipment and I walk out of the room and I go, put the phone on my face and I go, I was invited into this room and I looked at this guy and he didn't look up from his phone the whole time. I'll go back and try that again. And I tried it again. No response. And I'm not saying it's because I'm somebody special. If anybody walks in the room and shows an interest, enough of an interest in a product to look behind the speaker and look at the drivers and look at the cabinet, they're showing some interest. The person should walk over and go, let me tell you about this product. Let me tell you what's here. And some people do it and they're really good at it. And other people,
Yeah.
they don't do it. It's just they're losing. I mean, they're paying all this money to have a room. They should at least try to be active and engage people walking into the room, but they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a balance to it to some degree because if we're listening and we're trying to observe, some semblance of the sound with, some music that we have or something, we don't really want people, talking very loudly when that's going on.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if someone's interested in the equipment or what's going on and you're between tracks, it's a good time to discuss it and talk with someone about it, or take them into a separate room or out in the common area and discuss some of the products with them, if they have questions or something like that. But I think it's part of this day and age where, people are, how do I put it? I don't want to make it a millennial or Gen Z thing, but in today's society, we're so much into just solo efforts, so to speak, that communication amongst other individuals face to face doesn't seem to be a forte as much as it used to be. You know, people are more interested in a short text message, which you have to figure out how to decipher. If they can't get that done, they want to send a short email, you know, and the last thing they want to do is call someone on the telephone. And God forbid if you have to actually speak to someone face to face. You know, I'm from the school of where that's inverted. You know, it's easier to get in contact with someone, speak to them face to face, get an answer, move on. If you can't do that, you talk to them on the phone, get an answer, you move on. You know, you send an email, get an answer, move on. Text messaging, it's a little bit different. And so I think some of that rolls over into what we see in the rooms, you know, with people not necessarily communicating face to face as much as, you know, they probably could. I won't say should, but could.
I'm okay with walking into a room and interrupting things. I am, because I feel that we are there to work and we have only so much time. And if I'm shooting a video of the equipment, I'm going to be walking in and doing that. And I'll ask people if it's okay if I interrupt for a couple of minutes. And I find that most people are very, very accepting of that and are willing to take the break so we can get our footage or get our questions answered. I don't tend to just interrupt all the time, but I see if I can find it. If it's working and I can do it, I'll do it, because otherwise, if I have to stand around and wait 10 minutes in the room, I lose 10 minutes essentially. So it's selfish on one level. On another level, I think it's kind of necessary in order to cover all the rooms you have to cover. So
yeah. What I typically do if I walk in a room and they're in the middle of a song playing or something's going on where someone's sitting or whatnot, I'll come in, I'll take some pictures. And hopefully when this song is over, if that person has had time to actually listen, I don't just come in and say, get out of the seat, you know, I'm here. I'll wait. And the individual who's running the room, I'll ask if I could hear, you know, a song or two, you know, if it's a new product or something. And if the person is sitting there, I will physically ask them, is it okay if I listen to this one song and I'll give the seat right back to you. You know, and
you're nicer than me.
And typically that works out well. If, for instance, I go in the room and it's really busy, it's really crowded, I don't bother. I'll mark it down to return to the room and I'll move on. So I don't waste that 10 or 15 minutes just standing around waiting, you know, for that to happen.
What do you do?
I'll move on.
What do you do if the person who's running the room asks the consumer that's in the sweet spot to get up so you can sit down? You ever have that happen? That's really embarrassing.
Yes, it has happened. And I've told them, I said, no, I said, let the song finish, let them finish listening. I don't want to do that. And that's just, I don't do that. But when the song is over, and if they're still in the middle of a bunch of things, I'll just say, hey, you know, if you don't mind me listening to one or two songs, you know, and then I'll give the seat right back to you, that's fine. If not, you know, you go ahead, do what you got to do. I'll tell the person running the room, I'll come back later.
Yeah. And what do you think about
and that's pretty much it.
What do you think? By the way, I just want to say to people at home, you hear the dogs barking, I'm sure. So in the background, so I have 4 dogs, and one of my dogs is in heat, and I have 2 intact male dogs too. So I'm sorry, but I can't do anything about that. That's what's going on. So what do you think about rooms where you walk in and they say, I will not play anything that you bring. I only play what I brought to the show. I'm okay with that, because I've been in rooms where people have brought in really bad recordings, and the person was nice enough to play it. And then I see people walking into the room and hearing this horrible recording and thinking, oh, that room sounds bad, I'll go someplace else. So I understand why some people don't want to play requests. How do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one, because you always get those types that want to prove that something can't play their specific type of music the way they want to hear it, and they'll bring in something that's very difficult and controversial to play. And I can understand them not wanting to play certain pieces of music. Now, for me, I'll go in, and over the years, it's pretty clear that I don't do things like that. And generally, I kind of look at what the system's capable of doing if I'm coming in and it's playing music, and I kind of have an idea. And I usually go with something that's very revealing and telling, but it's not something that's way over the top. I'm not going to play, something like, a piece of music that Wagner's, one of Wagner's pieces, just to play it, to run people out of the room and to say, oh, whatever. So there are certain pieces of music I'll bring and play, and they're generally well received, and usually people want to know what it is, and then they go look for it. Either they find a digital track or something to look for it, or they go find the album, which is usually what I tell them
I was
to
sitting
do if
in a
they're
room.
playing vinyl.
I was sitting in a room at a show, and it was a very good room, good equipment. I'm not going to mention brands, and hearing a bunch of tracks. They all sounded great. And this guy came in with an opera he wanted to hear on a CD, and they said, okay, and they played it, and it sounded awful. It was bright, and hard, and clearly his CD was the problem, not the system. But this was his reference CD. So therefore, he must have set up a system at home around this CD. So his system must be very dark sounding on other music. But he left that room, and I met him, and he said, that was one of the worst rooms I've ever been in. It was so hard and bright. I said to him, you know what? Your CD is hard and bright, not the room. But it's not a way to make friends, but it was the truth of the matter. So I said it to him.
Yeah, well, it gets back to there's something for everybody at these shows, because those systems are set up for different types of individuals and different preferences and everything else. And yeah, this person that you're talking about must have, like you said, set up his system so that this one CD sounds good. But if he plays other stuff, it's probably going to sound a little bit on the softer and more polite side of the spectrum.
Unless he gravitates towards all CDs that sound like that, in which case you never know.
Yeah.
That's what's the great fascinating thing about these shows is you go room to room to room, and every system sounds different. Every room sounds different. I mean, there are certain ones,
Yes.
We know that there are certain companies that produce reliable sounding equipment that sounds correct in a certain way, that relatively sounds correct. And you go to these shows year after year, and the equipment sounds within a certain parameter of correctness, within reason. And then you walk into other rooms of companies you don't know, or companies that you do know, that have systems that have this particular coloration that, okay, some people like that, but I don't like that. But that's what I find. And it's the bigger companies, the more reliable, bigger companies that usually produce credible sound. That's just the way it is in my world as I see it.
Yeah, so they have resources, and usually they get the larger rooms, which are a little more easier to deal with from that perspective. But there are a lot of manufacturers that don't have new equipment that they're showing that's fundamentally sound, sounding equipment. Yeah. Not to put those two words together, but they're fundamentally good sounding equipment, and they have a baseline that's not bad. That's pretty good, actually. And so there's something for everybody at the shows to see. And then you do get the ones that move across that spectrum, which we've discussed before in one of the other meetings, where they have a specific sound that they like, or something like that, and that's what they're looking for at the show. And yeah, there's something for everybody there. So nobody's going to love every room.
That's right.
That they go in. Even if you go in with the same person and you listen to the same thing, that's no different than hearing someone play a drum in front of you or play a trumpet in front of you. And one person may like the way the person plays the trumpet, the other one may think it sucks. So,
I was talking to a retailer recently who stopped attending these shows, stopped participating in the shows, because he felt that he has a showroom, he's got an expensive infrastructure, he comes to the show, he shows his stuff, and then he finds out there are other people here who are selling out the back door and selling at a discount and not charging taxes. And so he's losing business to these people, and yet he's supporting the show that does that. How do you feel about that?
Well, I've never really considered it. You know, all these years, I had no idea that people were selling equipment, you know, during the show. I've even before I started writing, you know, it's like 15 years ago or something. It never occurred to me that equipment is being sold at the show.
You don't see the
You know,
signs show special, you
well,
know.
I've seen the signs so special, but I
Yeah.
didn't really pay attention to them because I thought, okay, well, you know, they're going through whatever normal processes that
Yeah.
they would go through if
I
the
didn't
person
think
were
of
at
it
the
either,
industry.
Andre. I never thought of it because I always said the retailers in the area who don't support the shows are being kind of parasitic because all these people are coming to the area, they're going to the show, and the local retailers are not supporting the show when they really should. And then I heard this other perspective just recently, and I said, "Oh, I never thought of that." And the problem is the people running the show, any show, they can't tell these participants not to sell because they need those people to show up and take a room and participate in the show too, and they can't cut them out. So
Right.
it's a conundrum, as they say.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, they're at the show. They're there to show their wares, so to speak. Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, if someone's interested, they have to get in contact with, you know, either the person that paid and is showing at the show, and you know, a transaction occurs that way. I'm not sure how much of the territorial things in audio are still, you know, there. Some manufacturers still have, you know, certain people have certain territories they're allowed to sell in, and you know, local dealers are the ones that do it. So there's kind of a mixed bag of items and conditions that are occurring, you know, at the show, or with, you know, a sale of a specific product, things that I don't have insight into, so to speak. But I would expect a local dealer, you know, to make an effort to support the show. You know, it would hopefully be successful for them, especially if a lot of local um, um, people are coming to the show
Yeah,
to see
that's
it.
my
So
take on it too. I think if people coming to look, these shows are getting so big that people are flying in from all over the world at this point. But still, the most of the people going to a show in the Chicago area are from the area. And so it would seem to me that it's beneficial to the retailer to be there and support the show so that people come in and hear the equipment that they sell in their store, which is in the area relatively, but some don't.
Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. As you may know, I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of The Absolute Sound. We have a new product. It's on the Substack platform, and we're going to do some interesting things with Substack. First of which is reader questions and answers. Each Monday, readers will submit questions. We'll pick the most interesting ones and we'll answer the questions on Friday. We'll also have early access to articles and special blogs that don't appear anywhere else. We hope you'll join us. It's only a cost of a cup of coffee per month. Just check on the screen or in the show notes below. Thanks. And now back to the show.
So how many shows do you go to? So do you go to Munich?
I have not been to Munich, and I have been told that that's a wonderful show to attend, but
Yeah.
the stars have not aligned just yet. And so one of these years, I will attend Munich, but I have not.
You'll enjoy Munich because it's where the business gets done. You know, it's where the entire industry does the ordering for the fall and winter season. You know, it's in May, and so that's where the ordering takes place, and the manufacturers find out how much they have to build and who's buying, and it's big, and you realize this is not like a cottage industry as some people say it is. It's pretty big. It is
No,
pretty
it's,
big. And you
yeah,
see the
it is.
same companies year after year, decade after decade, the major companies. They've been in business for decades and they're going to continue to be in business. It's a real thing. And then there are the upstarts. And sometimes the upstarts, you see them for the first time and it's an interesting product. And then they're there the next year. And after 5 or 8 years, they are established. And that's always fun to see. It's always fun to see somebody come with a new product and then be established after a couple of years and everybody finds out about them. So it is fun. Do
Okay.
you?
Well, yeah, I'll look forward to
Yeah.
that one day. Usually two shows that I attended the most were Rocky Mountain Audio Fest and AXPONA.
Yeah.
Those were the two shows that I typically attended. I hadn't really gone to the V show, either when it was in Vegas or in Southern California. Been to CAS before. That was interesting, which I don't think very many people in the audio industries are missing that
No, it's
show.
pretty much gone at this point.
Yeah. So, and then, new ones are popping up, with Florida show
Good
coming
show.
online,
Good
which is I've heard it's a good show.
Yeah.
And then, there's one in DC that's showing.
Cap Audio Fest is good, and so is the new one in Seattle.
And in Seattle,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm going to
so
I'm going to that one. Yeah.
but yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not retired, and so I don't get to. And it's this isn't my full-time gig, so I don't always have the time to go to every show, because in addition to the weekend that the show is there, a couple of days beforehand and day afterwards of travel time, and so it ends up being a long time to take off to be able to do these things. So, AXPONA has been the show that I've attended mostly. It's about a 5.5 hour drive from here, or probably the same amount with a plane flight, because
how do you go? Do you drive or fly?
I've done both. And this year I'm going to drive up. So it'll be a nice little ride through Indiana.
Hopefully there'll be no tornadoes and no snowstorms by the time this show happens.
Yeah, the last time we flew up, there was the year of the snowstorm, and a flight got delayed a day, and then it got transferred, and I had to go to Atlanta instead of a direct flight home. And that airport is incredibly huge, which we know. My connecting flight was, after I landed, 10 minutes was the time for my connecting flight, and it was on the other side of the airport. So I'm doing the O.J. Simpson thing, running through the airport. I get there, the doors closed, the plane.
They gave you a white Bronco to drive through the airport. Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't get the Bronco, so I just had to make the motor noises with my mouth. So I missed that, and so I had to go, talk to the service, the airport administration, and then get a new flight scheduled, and that was like 4 hours later. So it was horrible.
I'll tell you the best one I had. The best one I had was I was going to Salt Lake City, and it was going through Chicago, and the flight landed in Chicago around the same time that the flight was boarding to go to Salt Lake City, and it was on the other side of the, of like a different time zone.
Yeah.
I get off the plane, and there's a guy standing there with a iPad with my name on it. He says, "Mr. Fremer, follow me." And we walked down a set of spiral stairs right there on the tarmac, got into a limo, and they drove me around the other side of the airport, and I got onto the plane. I mean, that was...
Oh, man.
I felt important at that point. That was good.
Yeah, it's probably inappropriate, but that's some Giuliani stuff there going on. Because I've been in the airport where he basically caused my flight to wait for half an hour just for him to get on it.
How nice.
Yeah. Loved it.
I think it's because I am a 1,000,000-mile flyer on United at this point, so they take good care of me. I've done 1,000,000 miles. It's crazy.
Wow.
So it's good. It's good. And I like traveling. If you don't like traveling, this can be bad. If you like traveling, how good are you with remembering people's names by their faces? I think if I was good at that, I'd be a politician, but I'm not good at it. So until the name tags are on, sometimes I forget people's names, and they know my name, which is really embarrassing. How are you with that?
Well, it's difficult. I'm more of a face. I remember faces more than I do names.
Yeah, me too.
And so I'll see a face and I know the person, I know who they are, but sometimes the name just doesn't bubble up to the
how
top.
you doing? How are you? Who are you?
Yeah, I do remember faces, which I think is more important to actually remember the person than the name itself. Because Okay, that's probably good to know both, but it takes a while
Okay, so you
to
go into
sink
a
in.
room, and it sounds really bad. And the guy who's running the room says, "How does it sound? What do you think of the sound?" Do you tell them honestly what you think of the sound? I mean, in a nice way, or do you just cover it and say, "Oh, it sounds great"? Which do you tend to?
Well, I don't necessarily say it sounds great, but what I generally do is I say, well, what are your thoughts on, how the room is it performing up to the level that you think it should be? And, given the conditions, show conditions. And usually they pause and, they think about it a little bit and they'll give me a response. And I say, well, then yeah, show conditions are hard. Sometimes it's difficult to get the sound that you really want out of the room in such short, in such a short time frame. But and I leave it at that.
How do you gather your
Occasionally,
information? So when you're in a room, do you
mhm.
take notes with a pen and pad? Or do you speak into a little dictaphone, or do you have your phone set for recording and you take notes that way? How do you do it?
Well, taking notes verbally while music is playing seems like a difficult thing to accomplish easily without having that kind of impinge on everybody else around you that's listening. So I usually just have a pen and a pad and I take a few notes, key things that I want to know about, and then a general overall feel for the sound that's in the room and what's going on. And I usually leave it at that. And so when they see the show report, it generally talks about those key issues that I noted, and that's how I do it. So I'm still a pen and paper guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I still like to read to read, and I still like to see things on paper. A lot of people are into just straight up videos and that's it, but
And
that's a
how
whole nother
deeply do
subject.
so you walk in a room and do you write down every piece of equipment in the room, including the cables and the power conditioners and everything, and then get specific details about a particular product that you're interested in, or do you just go for the particular product that you're interested in? How do you do that?
That's where the line sheet of what's in the room is extremely important, and that's why I've always asked for it, so that I have the information on everything that's in the room. And then I can zero in a component that I'm interested in and write information about that. If I don't have the sheet of what's in the room and all the information, I don't take that as something that's on me to figure all that out. I take that as something where the people who are in the room and have the equipment haven't considered that information is important for a reviewer to have in order to cover all the equipment that's in the room. And so, yeah, I usually will write a little bit of information. The other thing I'll do if they don't have a sheet is I'll have them send me an email, and I tell them I'm on a tight time schedule. They need to get that information to me about what's actually everything that was in the room and whatever pricing information they have. And so it kind of gives them some responsibility in the process of getting that information to me. And 9 times out of 10, I get that information. I thank them for it, and I'm able to write the report on the room and what equipment was in there. But in a situation where it doesn't come, or it comes 2 weeks later, we're on a tight deadline, and we have deadlines, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Are you
well,
are you changing? Is the magazine shifting from publishing show reports in print to publishing show reports online because it's much faster, or is it a combination of both at this point? Because I'm just getting my feet wet in this regard at the Absolute Sound. I haven't done that many shows.
okay. Well, I can talk about the side that's under Harley's tier, so to speak. What Tom is doing on the video side, that's an area that I don't have insight into,
Yeah.
or any legacy or history with how it's functioned in the past. So
You're writing a
for the
print.
print
You're
magazine,
writing a print report is what you're writing.
correct.
That will
So
appear
for
in the
the print
magazine like
magazine,
3 months later, essentially. 2 months.
yes. However, for the print magazine, what we typically do is we'll cover the show. We have our assignment areas, and we'll have that information in probably a few days after the show. No more than 3 or 4 days after the show's over. That information is done. The editors have it. They're getting ready, and it goes into the slot for that next issue that's coming out. Now, in addition to that, if anybody looks on our website and you look at the blogs or the information on show reports, what you'll see is the day after the show, up to 3 or 4 days after the show, you'll see all of the reports come in, and they'll be available online for you to read right away. So it's a double barrel approach to doing this. And so our show reports will show up online a day after the show or a few days after the show. You can read all of that the writers have written about. And then later on, for those that didn't see the show or don't see the website, the magazine comes out. The show reports will be in there along with some of the articles. For instance, in the latest magazine, the May-June issue, the information from the Florida show is in there. And so you can read about Andrew and Alan's, reports from the Florida show.
Right.
Those are in there. But before that, a day or two after the show, they were up online. So you can read them at TASS's website. So that's my understanding of, at least from my perspective, on how things go from the insight that I have. Anything more than that, we'll have to talk to the editor or Tom and his group on the side for the videos.
The whole online revolution from the early days when there was no internet has just made show reporting so much more useful overall, because you have both platforms. You can get it up there right away, and then you can have a more considered point of view to write about in print, and it's a totally different kind of experience. So it's really good to have both, I think, at this point.
I agree. And then we're doing the video reports also now, which are starting to show up.
I love doing the video kind of things. That's my favorite thing, and I do it from the perspective. I try to make the person watching the video be me. You know what I mean? I go in as me, and I talk to people, and they get to experience the show as I get to experience it, which I think could be a lot of fun. People enjoy that. So have you been given an assignment yet for this show?
Well, I think my assignment is probably going to be source components, analog, and maybe digital. So that's probably where it's going, but I don't have the official, layout for everyone yet. So I'm not really sure, 100% sure, but there's a high probability that I'm covering analog and maybe even some of the digital sources.
Well, I'll see when
every
those
room,
rooms, I'm sure.
Yeah, every room has a source. So I guess I'll be finding out.
I was surprised in Montreal there was not as much record playing as I was expecting, and there weren't as many turntables as I was expecting. A lot of records for sale, which was good, but most people were not playing records. They were mostly streaming, which is the most convenient. Very few CD play. I mean, CDs are hardly ever used anymore. It's really amazing how this has changed. But it's so much easier to bring a hard drive and or connect to the internet and have Rune or something and stream Qobuz or Tidal. It's just so much easier now. People don't like to schlep a lot of records or even boxes of CDs for some reason.
Sometimes it's not easy getting the turntable set up properly and maintained, and if whoever's running the room doesn't really know how to deal with the turntable, you end up with a bunch of records that have been trashed, or God forbid, the stylus, certain parts of the stylus are no longer there. And then it's just something to look at. So there's more involved with getting it set up and running. Shouldn't be, on the basic level, it's pretty simple to put a turntable together and have it play records. As you improve your skills and setup and you pay more attention, you get much better sound, and your records will thank you for it, because they're much less risk of being damaged.
Yep.
But as you move up that scale, you need someone with skill to be able to do that.
You can preset a cartridge in an arm and ship it safely with the right stylus guard in place, and especially if you are a turntable manufacturer, you better be able to get a turntable set up at a show correctly. You better.
I agree. But sometimes the rooms aren't the ones that are turntable manufacturers, they definitely know what they're doing, and they'll get the system set up. But sometimes, someone will loan a turntable to someone, or they'll just grab a turntable from the dealership and, put it in the system, and hopefully it'll play well, and it's set up well. But yeah, I'm sure you've been around. There have been times where you'll listen to a record and there's mistracking or distortion coming in, and you know exactly what's wrong, but they think everything is fine.
How many times have you walked into a room at a show and they're playing a jazz record at the wrong speed and grooving along to it? I've seen that.
I've seen that before, yes.
And you know what? In all honesty, I've had a couple of records here that weren't well marked, and that I didn't know, new records, and I put them on and I played them at the wrong speed and they sounded great until I realized they were the wrong speed. Oops. Luckily,
yeah. Well, it's funny because we get requests that Chad did. It doesn't have 45 listed on it anywhere, but it's a double LP, and well, it's not a 45, it's a 33. Yeah. But because most of his LPs that are doubles are 45s, some people will get confused or fooled by that.
You know what's worse? You know what's worse than that? There are records that never came out originally in stereo that were recorded in stereo, and so there's no artwork for stereo. So, like Chad's put out a couple of prestige records that were stereo, that nothing on the jacket or the label says stereo. And I've also got this Eddie Lockjaw Davis with Shirley Scott box set. That's fantastic. And the first record in the box, there's nothing about stereo or mono. And fortunately, I played it on a stereo cartridge, because if you're kind of a purist, you would take it out and say, oh, it must be mono. I'll play with my mono cartridge. And I put this on my stereo side of things, and it was a really great stereo recording. And I wouldn't have known it if I hadn't accidentally played it with the wrong cartridge. So beware.
Yeah. Well, you bring up an interesting point there with the, I don't want to dig into it too much, but the cartridge issue with mono versus stereo and being a purist and all that. I have always considered a very well-made stereo cartridge more than capable of playing back a mono record. What you end up with if you go with a mono cartridge, that's a very well-made mono cartridge. And let's pick on Lyra, because they're good and they can take it.
Yeah.
The Atlas is a very good cartridge in and of itself. The Atlas Mono is a very good cartridge in and of itself.
Yeah.
If you play back a mono record with an Atlas stereo and an Atlas Mono, the chances are very high that you're going to get a similar sound signature out of them, because the cartridges are well made. The QC, their performance is based on reading the groove, not necessarily adding a flavor to it.
But if you cancel out vertical modulations with the mono switch,
vertical modulation gets out. Or with the switch, because if you can take a stereo cartridge and the pops and clicks you would normally hear, if you mono out the stereo cartridge, it cancels out all that noise right away. Yeah. And it's just as quiet as a standard mono cartridge would be. So there are ways of getting around that. What's interesting is, I remember we were at Rocky Mountain Audio Fest. You weren't there, but John was there, Atkinson, Jason was there, a few other reviewers were in the room, and Shane was playing the Beatles stereo. He played it. We listened to it on an Atlas stereo cartridge. Sounded great. He grabbed the Beatles mono and he played it with a Cleo's mono cartridge. It sounded good. And I looked at Shane and I said, Shane, before you pull it off, can you do me a favor? Play that with the Atlas stereo cartridge. He played it with the stereo cartridge, and it was significantly better sounding. And the reason it was significantly better sounding is because the Atlas was a better cartridge, a more linear sounding cartridge, and it pulled more information out of the grooves.
Sure.
After that, about 6 to 8 months later, Lyra introduced the Atlas Mono and the Etna Mono. Both of them came out after that. But that was an interesting tale. What I find is a lot of folks that I have communicated with and I've witnessed is they'll buy a mono cartridge and they'll play the mono records and they love the way it sounds, the density of the sound and everything else that they get with the mono cartridge. But what they don't do is they don't look at the characteristics and the performance envelope of that mono cartridge to find out why this specific cartridge sounds a bit different. And what you end up getting to is that the playback characteristics of that cartridge don't necessarily lock in with a straight RIAA curve, if you will, or the frequency response is different than another cartridge. And if you prefer that, that's great. We deal with that every day with stereo cartridges.
Yeah.
But typically the mono cartridges have some enhancements or some beautification to them in the frequency domain. That
What do you think? What do you think
preferring.
about? What do you think about people who say, well, if I'm playing old mono records, I want a cartridge that sounds like an old cartridge. It has a certain sound that the old record should sound like, as opposed to the new mono records. I've heard that argument too.
I say great, more power to you. You know, if that's what gets you listening to music and you enjoy it, go for it. I am not in a position to tell someone what they should or shouldn't like, or or do whatever. This hobby is very varied and people are all over the place. Now, I don't know if I do that. My idea of an old analog sound is not something I want to listen to if I'm able to get information out of the grooves more linear and better and more close to what it should sound like, as opposed to what it did sound like with the limitations that we had.
I agree.
At that time.
Well, some old records
have
a certain sound to them that I enjoy listening to the way it used to sound. It depends. It's nice to have the ability to swap things out and experiment. Like
that's the thing. Enjoy it. If you enjoy it, have fun with it.
I'm reviewing a cartridge now made by a musician, and as soon as you hear this cartridge, you'll know what his instrument is because it really makes that part of the frequency range just sound phenomenal, just incredible. But it's not a technician's cartridge. It's a musician's cartridge, and it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, a specific musician that plays a specific instrument's cartridge. But
yeah. I mean, if you
no doubt. Yeah.
Anyway, so we've been at this now pretty close to an hour, I think.
Oh my goodness, time flies.
Yeah, it's well, we started a little bit late, but I think we've probably gone long enough, and we're going to see each other in another week also. And so I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to my first AXPONA as part of the Absolute Sounds team, as opposed to passing you guys in the hall and go, "Hey, no, hey." It's much better. Everything's good. All right, so I'll see you next week, and have a nice week this week. And I didn't eat lunch today, but that's okay. That's okay.
All right. Well, I've got some yogurt and some pineapple, some fresh pineapple.
Awesome.
To eat, but I can't eat either one of them on the screen.
No,
because the pineapple would be crunchy and the yogurt may stick to my face, and that wouldn't be a good look.
it wouldn't be a good look. I think a sandwich would be a good look. But
I could probably get it around here, and it would be okay because nobody would notice.
Eating on camera is never really a good look, but one of these times we will both eat. We should both eat while we talk, just because that's what the name of this show is. So I think we should eat while we talk. But we'll save that for some other time. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you, and I hope that I will have a good show, and I hope you have a good show, and that we're well organized, because this is going to be a really big show, and there's a lot to cover. And my inbox is filled with invitations, and hey, can you spare a half an hour? Because I don't know. We'll see. All right, Andre, be good. Have a good week, and have a nice Easter. And I'll see you next week.
Okay. Same to you, Michael. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.